Hi everybody, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Majors in Quinn. My name is Sophia and I'm a bookseller here. I'm so happy that you're joining us in celebration of Dodge County Incorporated. So a couple things before we get on with the conversation tonight. Tonight you'll hear from Sonja Trom Eayrs in conversation with Jeff Forrester. Then there will be time at the end for audience questions. After the Q&A, we ask that you let our guests move to the signing counter where you'll have a chance to get a book and get it signed and visit. And then I'm going to do my mandatory bookseller plug here and say that if you buy a book from us this evening, you're not only supporting the author, you're supporting an independently owned local bookstore, so we thank you so much for that. All right, I'll just quickly introduce our guests, and then I will turn it over. So, Sonja Trom Eayrs, author of Dodge County Incorporated, Big Ag and the Undoing of Rural America, is a farmer's daughter, rural advocate, and attorney. She is involved in several rural advocacy organizations, including the Socially Responsible Agriculture Project, Farm Action, Land Stewardship Project, and Dodge County Concerned Citizens. Trom Eayrs also serves as the manager for the Trom Family Farm in Dodge County, Minnesota. Jeff Forrester is the executive director of Minnesota Lakes and Rivers, which is a statewide org protecting water quality across the state of Minnesota. He's also the author of Forest for the Trees, How Humans Shape the North Woods, which came out with the University of Minnesota Press. Please join me in welcoming Jeff and Sonja. Those microphones are live.
Thank you. What a great crowd. So thanks for coming out on this rainy night. I'm going to have Sophia, she'll advance the slides for me. Dodge County is in the southern part of the state, so if you know where Rochester is and Owatonna, there's Highway 14 connects the two, and if you're kind of midway between Highway 14, you go south, and our farm is about 5-6 miles south of Claremont. So my hometown is Blooming Prairie, home of the blossoms. So I started, by the way, writing this book in about 2017. So it was a long time in process. And I heard a quote recently by Meryl Streep, because this was an extremely painful book to write, because we've been on the front lines for a long time fighting corporate agriculture. But Meryl Streep nailed it. She said, take the pain in your heart and turn it into art. And I think that's, for me, it's been a very healing process. So I'll let you advance. Our story begins in 1892. This is a picture of my great-grandfather, Ed Trom. In Norway it's Troim. And he came to the United States with 2 relatives and then settled in Dodge County. So my family's been in the county since 1892. And then in the next photo, this is Little Westfield Lutheran Church. This church sits on the same mile square as our family farm. And my great-grandfather, Ed, who was just pictured, was the chief architect. And a lot of the neighbors got together and they built Westfield Lutheran Church. And we, in fact, still hold services there a few times each year. The church has been completely restored, lifted off its foundation, new roof, new siding, brand new stained glass windows, and so it's a beautiful little church. It's been standing there since 1917. The next photo is from the 1930s. This is about 1932. My father was one of 10 children. He grew up on the family farm, and he's pictured there on the far right with 2 of his sisters. And you can see it was, my dad would always say it was pretty crude. So you can see how just, that's where I came from, you know. The next photo is a picture of our farm today. We are very proud of our farm, and it's been in the family actually this year 100 years. My great-grandfather's farm is 2 miles to the south. This was my grandpa's farm, and so 100 years for our farm. And we're engaged in production agriculture, which means corn and soybeans. So we do rotation, corn, soybeans, every other year. And I'm actively involved in the operation of the farm. On the next photo, this is when we first started to realize like something's up, but nobody really understood. And this was early sign of consolidation. This is just 1 mile north of our farm. There are 2 swine factory farms. The industry folks hate it when I call them factory farms, and so I always call them factory farms. So the first one went up in 1993, the second in 1998. And this was the son of a Farm Bureau farmer, actually someone that I babysat. And in the mid-90s, things were starting to change, and my sister Shelley and her husband Dave farmed just outside of our hometown of Blooming Prairie. And Dave noticed that when he would deliver hogs to Hormel, and Hormel's just 15 miles from Blooming Prairie, the wait times were getting longer and longer because the independents, the guys like Dave, who owned their own hogs, had to sit and wait 45 minutes to an hour. While the big semi-loads coming in from these operations that were popping up all over southern Minnesota, these folks were given first priority. And so they were given access to the marketplace while these independents had to wait. And you can imagine, like, but still, no one understood what was happening. And then in the next slide, this is a picture of my sister Shelley and her husband Dave. This was taken just a few months ago. And 1998 was the breaking point for independent farmers like Dave and Shelley. And they were forced out of farming. So, and the comment that you hear frequently is get big or get out. And that was the famous Earl Butt saying back in the Nixon administration, I believe. And so farmers, we've lost thousands and thousands of independent farmers from the land, those who, own their own hogs. And so essentially they were locked out of the marketplace and couldn't deliver to Hormel, even though the plant was just a few miles from the farm. And then in that 1998, which I just told you a few minutes ago, that's when that second building went up at the neighboring farm. So while you have these independents who are forced out, the guys who were contract growers, and I'll get into that in just a minute, were putting up a second and third building. This is a photo that was taken a few years later in the early 2000s, and I tell you this because I want to drive home how long this has been happening. This has been very methodical, very strategic. This is a very long-term plan of action. And our problems were not just limited to hog factory farms. In the early 2000s, my family fought installation at that time of what would have been the largest dairy operation in the state of Minnesota. That was going to be constructed just a couple of miles north of our farm. And so this picture was taken on our farm. That's my dad. It's our tractor, one of our tractors we had at the time. I'm not sure if we still have that one. But my dad's there, my mother's in the white coat, my brother's sitting on the ground. And these are several neighbors that all work together to try and fight installation of that large dairy operation. And this was a bipartisan effort. It was Republicans and Democrats working together to try and push back against this big industrial operation. And During that time, we worked with Land Stewardship Project, and many of you may have heard of Land Stewardship Project, or LSP, and that was a 3 to 4 year battle that went on and on and on. And all these neighbors had to pay legal fees out of their own pockets, thousands and thousands of dollars, to try and fight installation of Ripley Dairy. In the next slide, this is the old Claremont High School. This is about 6 miles north of our farm. During the battle of, I call it, it's Ripley Dairy, and our farm is on a township road. So on the north, we have Ripley Township. On the south, we have Westfield Township. So Ripley Dairy, like Ripley Township. And during that fight, one evening, instead of the meeting occurring at the local town hall, which used to be a small one-room school, you've all seen them, the meeting was moved to the old high school. And the neighbors walked in, and it wasn't a group of neighbors any bigger than this. And they walked in, and there were about 200 corporate executives that descended on Claremont, Minnesota that night. And those were corporate executives from Hormel, Land O'Lakes, Monsanto, AgStar Financial, which helped to finance a lot of these big industrial operations. That's who was sitting in the chairs. And most of the citizens had to stand because they didn't have chairs for the citizens. And during that fight, in fact, I brought along a copy of the publication. Farm Bureau put out a publication called When an Activist Group Comes to Town. We're multi-generation. We've been on the land for years, and yet we were painted as activists and trying to, cast us in a, dirty light somehow, because we were fighting back against installation of this great big corporate factory farm. Today, this high school, believe it or not, serves as dormitory housing for area factory farm workers. That's what we have done to rural America. On the next slide, this is a picture of my parents, Lowell and Evelyn. My parents are both gone, but our battles were not just limited to, were not over, because in 2014, this is a picture that was taken at the local nursing home in Blooming Prairie. My mother suffered from advanced Parkinson's disease. She had Parkinson's for many years. She was in the nursing home for about 10. And a few months after she went into the nursing home, my father received notice of yet another swine factory farm that was going into the immediate area. We have 12 swine factory farms in a 3-mile radius of our farm. It's serious. People have no idea how serious it is. So there's a reason they're all grouped together. I can get into that later. But so she had just entered the nursing home, and I'll never forget the call from my dad. And he said, "Enough is enough." And I said, "All right, Dad." I said, "I'll help you find legal counsel. I'm an attorney, but I do not practice in that area. I'm a family law attorney, so divorce, custody, all the kind of sticky stuff." So help them find an attorney, and you get 10 days notice. That's it. That another factory farm is coming into the area. And so it was at that point that I felt a deep sense of responsibility, a deep sense of purpose, that it was my job to get involved and to help my elderly parents, because they worked their entire lives. My dad died at 90. He was born in the house, and he died over at Mayo, but he was at the farmhouse just a few hours before he died. So 90 years. And so, if you love something, you fight for it. So in the next slide, this is the swine CAFO, or factory farm, that we fought. It's just 1/2 mile west of our farm. You'll notice there's no farm. There's no family. and there's no farm. Just this building that's the size of a Walmart out in the countryside. You can also see to the left, that's a composting station or a dead box. That's where the dead pigs are stacked. And they're put under wood chips typically, so you're gonna see those. Bear with me one second. These are buildings that are built to industry specifications. They hold 2,400 hogs. That's the magic number because it's just under the number for environmental review. There is no EIS or environmental impact statement. There is absolutely no environmental review. Underneath is a pit, a manure pit. It's 8 feet deep and it holds 1.1 million gallons of manure. That manure is spread on the land typically in the fall. And they turn these buildings based on the life of the pigs about every 2.5 times a year. So that's how often they're turning it, and it'll hold 1 year's worth of manure that's spread on the land. You'll have to come down sometime. As though those proceedings continued for about 3 years, my parents actually had 3 separate lawsuits. Can you imagine? My mother is in the nursing home. My parents are engaged in 3 separate legal proceedings against Dodge County officials and local industry operators. And so it was not a fair fight. The Dodge County Planning Commission had been stacked with industry insiders, and the county board was also favorable. Dodge County, by the way, and probably like some other counties, has never denied a permit for one of these CAFOs. But as those proceedings wore on, I realized the enormity of this and realized that 1 lawsuit or 2 lawsuits or 3 lawsuits wasn't going to make a difference given the enormity of this fight, because we're fighting corporate power and we're now seeing it on a national level. But this has been building and building and building for decades. And so we're fighting that corporate power. And I realized that we weren't fighting for just my family to stay on the land, but for all farm families to stay on the land. One of the things I discovered in this battle was that as I started writing the book, things, I'm telling you, it just fell into place. It started to write itself, and one day I see a decision from the Minnesota Court of Appeals. It was between a contract grower and an integrator, and I'll explain that in a minute, but I recognized the names. I ran over to the Supreme Court. I got a copy of the transcript, over 1,000 page trial transcript. It was like plugging in a Christmas tree because it explained how this whole system works. And at the top you have the multinationals, and the multinationals in the hog industry include Hormel, JBS, which is owned by the Brazilians. By the way, they've just applied they want to trade now on the New York Stock Exchange. They were the largest contributor to Trump's inauguration, $5 million. Also the Smithfield, which is owned by the Chinese, and Tyson Foods. Those are the big 4 in the swine industry, the big 4 corporate meat processors that control the market. And so they're at the top of the pyramid. In the middle you have integrators. Those integrators are companies such as Christensen Farms, which is down in southwestern Minnesota, Holden Farms in Northfield. In Iowa you have Iowa Select, Prestige. The integrators own the supply chain, so they own the hogs. At the bottom you have contract growers, what we used to call farmers. And there's 2 levels of contract. So there's a contract between the contract grower and the farmer and the integrator. I have a copy of the contract. I refer to it frequently in the book. Then there's also another contract between the integrator and the multinationals at the top. that's referred to as the Hormel Matrix. I don't have a copy of that contract, but I'd sure like to get my hands on it. But what's important to see here is that this is what they've done is they've created a corporate network in rural America. And if you're part of the network, you're a contract grower, you get access to the marketplace. This is a closed system. Nobody can show up at Hormel with a load of hogs unless you're part of this system. So where are you going to get your meat? You have to go to an independent, go to a local meat market. That's the only place that you can get meat from an independent farmer. Otherwise, you're buying into this corporate system. And there are significant political implications from this system. Again, we're seeing it now finally on a national level. But this is what's happening throughout rural America, these huge corporate networks that have been developed over the past 2 to 3 decades. In the next slide, this is a stop sign with bullet holes. My family has faced tremendous harassment and intimidation over the years, but I discovered as we got into this, we're not alone. There are lots of frontline families throughout the Midwest, and I know families in Illinois, Michigan, the Dakotas, Iowa, Wisconsin, frontline families that have also faced harassment and intimidation tactics. A few hours after my brother and I were pulling weeds out of the bean field, they sprayed the stop sign with bullet holes. They would call my elderly father, who was in his mid to late 80s, in the middle of the night. Can you imagine? You get a call at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Joel, have you changed yet? Those are the kinds of calls that were coming in. They also made false telephone calls to the sheriff's department about me, not to report some kind of infraction, but to try and put the heat on me and try to get me to shut up. You can see how well that worked. They blue farm booties. They were booties inside those facilities. They took the soiled blue farm booties, placed them every 100 feet or so on the township road leading to our driveway. Just another reminder that the industry is large and in charge. Garbage dumped week after week after week into our road ditches and our driveway. Again, another reminder. We finally got them to stop that after they dumped some garbage and we could identify who was doing it. So, anyway, I mean, the beat goes on. This is so. I probably need therapy after all of this, but I've done lots of presentations. I know where all the front lines are right now fighting corporate agriculture. And in the next slide, this is from a few weeks ago. This is a group in western Wisconsin. They are fighting expansion, actually, of a large dairy operation that's currently 1,700 dairy cows, wants to expand to 6,500 dairy cows near the Mississippi River. What could possibly go wrong? We had 90 to 100 people at that meeting. Again, it was a bipartisan group. People who are fighting, and it's always the same fight. It's community versus corporation. So I want to leave you with this final thought on the next slide. This is from one of the blurbs in my book from Senator Cory Booker, and he states that the people have the power to fight back. And and that's right, that we combine, when we get people educated and informed, we have the power to fight back against corporate agriculture. So on the final slide, I'm easy to find professionally, but if you need to communicate with me, there's a link to my author website. And if you read the book, I have a favor to ask, and that is if you take time and write a review in the, either Amazon or Goodreads or both, that helps to promote the book. So Jeff has graciously stepped in. Senator Dibble could not be here this evening. He's tied up over at the legislature, so Jeff jumped in, and so here we go.
Thank you for writing this. We met, I think it was probably 2014, 2015, and you know, we work to protect water, and obviously the water implications of spreading 1.2 million gallons of manure on fields are profound. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the you know, we're getting cancer hotspots in southwestern Minnesota and kind of the health implications of what this factory farming is doing in Minnesota?
Well, you know, like our farm, with 12 of these in a 3-mile radius, just take 12 times, right? 12 of these facilities, that's 12 million gallons of manure in a 3-mile radius. Some of these fields are typically spread oftentimes at night. Nobody knows how much, nobody knows where. They double pledge the same land. Again, nobody knows how much, nobody knows where. A lot of this is voluntary. They'll tell you that they're regulated. Trust me folks, we know what's going on. But so there's high nitrates, phosphorus, and actually in Dodge County, on the north end of the county, my husband also grew up in Dodge County. On the north end, I grew up on the south end. But on the north end, take a look, there was an article that was a few years ago in the Star Tribune. The Star Tribune wrote their own article, but it was in the new LEAD, L-E-D-E, and about Cancer Road. And that's 1 mile north of where my husband grew up. 20-some years ago, and I talk about that fight in the book, the Burn Alliance, so burn Minnesota like burn Switzerland. They fought installation of a swine gestational facility. And think of a wagon wheel. And in the middle you have the gestational facility, and then out from that you have, the pigs are born here, right? You've got the sows, and then the baby pigs. From there they go out to a couple of nurseries, and then from there you get all these feeder operations. That's why so many of these are grouped together, like by our farm. Same thing by my husband's, where my husband grew up. They fought installation of that gestational facility. It's on karst topography, which means it's like this limestone. There isn't much topsoil, and you're almost instantly, you're going to cut right through that, and you're going to get right into the water system. But they have high nitrates. At the Eayrs farm, we would regularly test the water. We could not drink the water there because the nitrates were 24, 25, 26. They should be 10 milligrams per liter or under. But on Cancer Road, every single family on that road has had some form of cancer. And finally, a few years ago, I went to a friend who lives on that road, and I said, I've got this journalist who used to write for the New York Times, and I said, will you talk to him? And he said, Sonja, it's time. And he came forward. Iowa, by the way, is #1 in hog production in the United States. I heard recently Iowa has something like, they don't even know how many CAFOs they have in Iowa, but over 13,000. And #1 in hog production, #2 in the number of cancer incidents per year. So there's clearly a connection between high nitrates and the incidence of cancer.
Yeah, and in many cases it's kids, high school kids, that are getting the cancers. Like those rates are even higher in terms of the population. So your father used to use the term handmade farm. You want to go into a little bit, we have this idea of farms in our mind that doesn't really bear a lot of resemblance to the realities in many cases.
We think about farms and we think about the red barn, right? White houses, red barns. That is those are Norwegian farms. You go to Norway, that's exactly what they look like. But our farm, so my dad would talk about, he was born in 29, but he talked about how he turned native sod back in the 30s. And he sliced through with, one or two, probably a 2-bottom plow to slice through native sod. And where I grew up, our farm is at the headwaters of the Cedar River, which flows south into Austin, and then eventually it goes into Iowa and eventually into the Mississippi. But starting in 1949, they started to put in a drainage ditch because, like, you can imagine, and our farm probably was, a lot of wetlands and so forth. That's what they were doing in those days, is that, we were draining that, and we have a lot of drainage tile on our farm, but, that's what farmers were encouraged to do, so that we could make that land productive.
Yeah. So, we've been at this 30 years, MLR has been around, and I'm trying to think, I can't think of a regulation, a mandatory regulation that's been passed on ag in that time. It's all voluntary measures, programs, incentive payments, so it's pretty much a failure. How does this failure, how did it evolve? What are the motivations for this? I mean, you made the point about all your efforts are bipartisan. Our membership is spread across the state of Minnesota. We have members in every legislative district in the state. When we analyze our database of 50,000, it's 48% Democrat, 46% Republican. So water is completely bipartisan. Everybody wants clean water, yet we don't have it. What do you think is the reason why?
Why we don't have it?
Yeah.
There's big money behind this. So, how many of you have heard about checkoff dollars? You know what I'm talking about? Every time we sell a load of corn or a load of beans, they automatically, so you take your load of corn or your load of beans to the elevator, right? They automatically withhold checkoff dollars. The corn checkoff dollars are supposed to be used for marketing and promotion. So the checkoff dollars I can get back. So I apply for every single dollar because I'm gonna get, because I don't support what they do. The soybean dollars, the soybean checkoff, we cannot get back. But all of these commodity groups, there are checkoff dollars, and all the hog, these industry groups, the hogs, the dairy, etc. They collect nationwide over $1 billion a year. So, and a lot of those dollars, so you have the Minnesota Pork Board, and then they have their own trade association. And because those dollars are supposed to be used for marketing and so forth, right? But you've got a trade association that's over here. It is an industry group. They are not working for independent farmers. They are working for corporate agriculture. And they are promoting industry giants as part of this. And they're taking money from every single hog farmer to promote industry. So that's a lot of the reason, because you've got there's such big money in it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other problem you've got is you have, I'm gonna make this political, you've got Republican-aligned Farm Bureau that has been pushing this stuff for years, and they built up their membership, and it is Farm Bureau farmers that have spearheaded a lot of these factory farms throughout rural America. This has been going on for years and years and years. So I talk about, my great-grandpa died in 1949, and Farm Bureau came because they were trying to get my grandpa and my dad to join Farm Bureau back in 1949. So they've been spearheading all this corporate agriculture for years.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit about the relationship? I mean, there's a lot written, and you drive around and you see these small rural towns with empty businesses and really struggling. your example was the high school. What's the relationship between corporate farming and the quality of life in the communities across the state?
Well, corporate agriculture has totally, completely hollowed out these small rural communities. I mean, so, because it's, again, it's this get big or get out. And
Right.
so, you drive through rural America, and you should, by the way, get out there. You know, drive from here to Granite Falls, Minnesota. Get on, I think it's 212. It's eye-opening. Then come back a different way. And it is truly eye-opening because churches have been turned into museums. Schools have been turned into museums. My husband's hometown of West Concord, I was actually there about 10 days ago. The high school that he went to is now a museum. That's what we've done to rural America because of corporate agriculture. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but the industry has just ruined these small communities. I mean, can you imagine? You're a small farmer like my brother-in-law Dave. He was one of thousands and thousands, and I've heard the number anywhere from 100,000 to 500,000 independent farmers who have been pushed off the land. And because they can't get access to the marketplace. Those are all farmers that are leaving, and we're left with these great big corporate operations.
And old hardware stores that now sell resale stuff.
Oh,
You know, like the old chairs and tables and, fishing poles, and every town has one, and I just always think, oh, that's the detritus of a lost community,
yeah.
right? People selling their things as they leave, and it's, well, so in Minnesota, like, the CAFOs are just kind of, in 2014, Minnesota was 17th or 18th in the state in terms of hog production. And I think today we're second behind Iowa.
We are, we're number 2.
We're number 2.
Iowa, Minnesota, North Carolina.
What changed?
In Minnesota?
Yeah. Do you think it was when they got rid of the citizens
That was-
review panel on the permitting?
That was probably part of it, but
If you remember, actually, there was, Dayton was governor, and they actually shut down the state budget. They've shut down the state over it because they wanted to remove the citizens panel on the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency that reviewed permits for CAFOs. And there was a big, I think it was a dairy farm going in outside of Rochester, thousands of head, and the citizens review panel said no. And they pushed back and got rid of the citizens review panel and put the farm in. And were you engaged at that point?
I was engaged starting in April of 2014.
So right about the same time.
Yeah.
And then where are the hot spots now? Like I know that like hogs, ironically, don't tolerate polluted water. So they're going to where there's good water, right? Until it becomes polluted and then they can move on. But where are the hot spots in Minnesota?
So, right now, probably the biggest hotspot is in northern Minnesota, Becker County, Detroit Lakes, in the heart of our lakes country. And you can tell me, but I think someone from Becker County told me they have something like 300 lakes in about a 25-mile radius. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and just south of there is Otter Tail, which has more lakes than any county in the United States.
So, and, but if you expand the lens a little bit, you also need to look at what's happening across the Red River in North Dakota, because I've worked with those folks. I think I went to North Dakota for the first time in about 2017. They were the industry was trying to put in two swine gestational facilities, one near Buffalo, North Dakota, which is outside of Fargo. The other one is by Devil's Lake. Have any of you been to Devil's Lake? It is a sacred lake. It's part of Spirit Lake Nation. They wanted to put a swine gestational facility on the edge of Spirit Lake, almost on the edge of Spirit Lake. What could possibly go wrong? And guess who was going to put up that facility? Any answer? A Farm Bureau farmer. So, anyway, but the local citizens fought back. They were adopting local planning and zoning at the local level. And 2 years later, the North Dakota legislature got rid of local control, which is exactly what they did in Iowa. That's how they that's how they ruined Iowa, because the local citizens could no longer fight back. And so they got rid of local control, they ruined Iowa, and it's the same page out of the same corporate playbook, and the same thing is happening right now in North Dakota. So, that's what's happening across. I can tell you more about North Dakota, but so what's happened in Minnesota? You know, thank God we still have local control. And I talk about that in the book. There's a whole long story about that. I won't get into it tonight, but you know, the industry they'll do whatever they have to get in.
Well, and you look at the way farmers have organized themselves since the state was a state, right? The example we were talking about was the biggest event in the state is the Minnesota State Fair, which is an agricultural cheering event, basically. That's the core. Every county has their county fair, which promotes agriculture. It's a Farm Bureau event. I worked down at the Capitol, and many of the legislators are farmers. You look at county commissioners, and they're really diligent about running for county commissioners, local township boards, watershed district boards. From our perspective, there's 500 lake associations in the state of Minnesota, average of 200 per lake association, members per, that's 100,000 people, right? I think Farm Bureau has like 40,000 members in the state of Minnesota. So there's people there, but we're not used to engaging at that level. We're not used to running for watershed district board. We're not used to running for soil and water conservation district board, or variance board, or township board, or county commissioner. And because we have local control still, that's the only place to really have an impact, is at that local level. But you write about kind of the climate and things changing at church and on the street, and just what this struggle is doing to local communities and quality of life in these local communities. You want to kind of share some of the pressure, peer pressure.
The divisiveness, I mean, you can sense it. My parents initiated their first lawsuit in May of 2014. And I would go to church with my dad, in my home church, because I knew he was getting the cold shoulder. And so, this is his lifelong church, and yet people were afraid to approach him, because what's happening in these small communities, jobs are threatened, businesses are threatened. That's why I'm in a unique position to speak out, because I don't live there. I don't have children in the school district. I don't have grandchildren in the school district. I don't routinely go to church in my hometown. I do from time to time. But these are extremely divisive fights. I question whether or not my home community, right in the immediate area, if it will ever heal in my lifetime. But my dad's getting the cold shoulder, and this would go on and on. So started the first lawsuit in May, but I'll never forget that fall. I'm walking out of church with him, and my dad had a cane, and he's heading out of church, kind of slumped over, and an elderly member of the congregation came up to us and said, he looked at me and he said, "Thank you. Thank you for your work on behalf of your family and on behalf of our community." So, anyway, sorry. That is what has carried me for over 10 years, because I knew that we were on the right track. I knew it, and I knew that the silence meant that other people agreed with me. And so what this book has done is it has given people voice, and it's given them a chance to speak out. And, you know, I did an event just a few weeks ago in my hometown. We had a group about this size. So slowly the word is getting out.
Yeah.
And but I will also tell you, I've had trouble scheduling events in some small communities, because you know what's happening? These small town libraries are afraid to hold book events that promote my book. My book was a finalist for the Minnesota Book Awards. It is a finalist for the Midwest Book Awards. But people are afraid, because these libraries are afraid they're gonna lose their public funding. That is a shame, but that's what's going on.
Well, and the irony, right, is the book I worked on was a finalist and for the Minnesota Book Award, and it's a lot of the librarians are the ones voting on it. So they're voting for the book and then afraid to have the event, right? And that's huge. I mean, that's a real indication of how conflicted these communities are about these issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you mentioned the Minnesota State Fair.
Yeah.
I call it Big Ag Fest. But, I mean, you gotta look at who's part of this group. I picked this up last year, or a few years ago. This is put out by the Minnesota Pork Board. It's an industry coloring book. It talks about Little Billy and hogs that are raised in confinement. These pigs never see the light of day. They're never on grass. So, yeah, see, this is what we're teaching children. By the way, they also have materials called Ag in the Classroom. I call it Big Ag in the Classroom. That's what they're doing. It's all corporate indoctrination.
Yeah. Well, and there's always the Future Farmers of America down at the state capitol, and they all have their blue coats on, and they go around and lobby, and 4-H is huge at the state capitol. We did have a lake association that made they got a grant down in Fairmount, and they bought the high school hoop houses to grow plants in, and the biology teacher they started out with beans and corn, different varieties, growing them in this greenhouse, and then the lake association went to them and said, if you were to grow native shoreline plants, we would hire the students to do shoreline restorations on the lake, to restore native shoreline, and prevent runoff, and they bid on it. So now there's Future Farmers of America and 4-H students raising native plants in these greenhouses and then working with the Lake Association. So they understand now what happens when phosphorus and nitrogen flow into a lake. I mean, it creates algae blooms and kills the lake. So, but it's all these little things, right? It's just little pushbacks, trying to get into the, under the kind of pressure that's above, which is considerable,
You gotta start the discussion
Right.
somewhere. Even if it means a few bullet holes in the stop sign.
What can, people, buy the book, read the book, share the book, promote the book, but beyond that, what are next steps for people that want to engage in this struggle?
So I have received dozens of notes and emails, handwritten letters from people, and it's usually three things. Thank you, and then I've learned so much, and the next, which is really heartwarming, what can I do? You have to get active. You have to get active, whether that is in your local community, but you've got to inform people. I always think about the rule of 5. If I tell 5 people, then you tell 5 more, and you tell 5 more. We've got to get people educated about what's happening and help push back. So I definitely would say get active. You can change the way you eat. Go to the Minneapolis Farmers Market. Buy from a local farmer. You don't have to buy industrial meat unless you want to, but you don't have to buy industrial meat. Minneapolis Farmers Market, go to the co-op. There's also, if you're on Facebook, it's called Farm Direct. You can find a local farmer.
We have a listing on our website of Regen Ag, so it's actually farmers that are using Regen agriculture to improve soil health. And they're on our website, and you can order directly from them. My wife was a vegetarian when I met her, and we were married 25 years, and I started ordering the Regen Ag meat, lamb and beef, and now she eats meat, but only that meat.
So, yeah, so I'd say, and, join an organization, so Jeff's group, another group is Land Stewardship Project here in, statewide. Land Stewardship Project is also working on sustainable agriculture, and,
Lake associations are good. If you have a lake that you love, you can join the lake association and advocate that they start getting agricultural runoff on their radar. Because, and it's interesting, south of I-94, the lake associations are really aware. But north of I-94, kind of in the cabin country, they're not. It's not on their radar yet, and it's coming. And in places like Becker County, they were caught unaware. They didn't have it on their radar. We've been trying to reach out, but it's one of those things where you don't quite get the connections between these, because they look so innocuous. Right, but by spreading the manure in the fall, then it gets covered with snow, and then in the spring when the snow melt comes, it flows into the nearest water body. I mean, imagine if, so how many hogs how many hogs
we
were
have like 30,000 hogs.
Okay, imagine a
in a
community
3-mile
of
radius.
30,000 people, a town of 30,000 people, and their solution to the sewage that was produced by that community was just to spread it on the land around it. That's what we're doing. So there's problems.
The major problems.
Yeah.
Well, plus also the, just imagine the stench. I mean, really, in about November 1st, anywhere from October 20th to about maybe the first week in November, you need to get down to southern Minnesota, get off the main roads, get on a township road. You need to see these operations. And, I mean, it's the stench is horrifying. You cannot be out in it. My dad was, and I include this in the book, fall of 2017. Something I always did with my dad, was fall harvest. Like, I'd get on the combine with him. My husband would be up at the house. He'd like, when are you coming in? I'm like, it'd be 3 or 4 hours later. But they're spreading manure right within yards where we're trying to wrap up fall harvest. And he had to step off the combine to vomit because it's hydrogen sulfide, it's methane, ammonia, it's all of these dangerous gases that are when they do the pump out, because when they agitate those pits, all these dangerous gases are emitted from the pit. But just because you're here in the Twin Cities doesn't mean that you're exempt from all of this. So, because these gases are contributing to climate change, you got a cabin up north, hey, get on board, folks, because it's here and it's coming to northern Minnesota because there's disease in these buildings. We just saw it with all the bird flu. And a lot of these pigs are going north because of the disease. They have to spread these facilities out for disease control.
In 2018, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency listed 42% of the surface waters in the state as impaired. 2022, they updated it and it was 56. It's happening really fast. Right? It's, there's a urgency here. And so I was so glad to, read I think I read it in maybe, was it January? I got the first draft, and we're going to be doing a webinar about it and trying to spread the word, but thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And did you want to open it up for questions? I'm sure people have some.
Questions from anyone?
What makes Minnesota so attractive to hog farmers?
Water.
Clean water.
These are very water intensive facilities. So they take that water. You know what they pay for the water? $150. for a water permit. But each facility, so 2,400 hogs, average of 4 gallons of water per day per hog, so that's 9,600 gallons per day, I'm sorry, for one facility, right? So almost 10,000 gallons of water per day. Now multiply that times 365, you got over 3.5 million gallons of water that they're taking up from the aquifer. And now so that's with 12 of these around us, so 3.5 million times 12, if my math is right, that's like 42 million gallons of water. Is that right? So,
Yeah. And when the aquifer eventually becomes polluted with nitrates, which the hogs can't tolerate, they just move the farm.
but
And
they,
the land goes where?
The land, they don't take a lot of land, it's just that barns, those barns that you saw, they're like, pole barns.
Whose fields are they dumping this manure on?
well, not ours, but they dump it on everybody else's around us.
They sell
So-
it as fertilizer.
Mhm.
So
And
they'll
the
say,
state
oh, no,
doesn't-
it gets.
The state doesn't regulate that. How
No.
many gallons, how many tons can be dumped on?
Well,
fields?
they're supposed to provide an
Yeah.
MMP, a manure management plan. And they're supposed to provide, state where they're going to spread the land, because you're supposed to provide this manure management plan. But when we, dove into this, I mean, I've got boxes and boxes of material. The manure management plan, they double pledged the same land. The same 190 acres that was pledged for this facility was pledged for this facility. That's what I'm saying, nobody knows.
And how does enforcement work? So who would be charged with enforcing?
The MPCA.
Right, and their local offices, right, which is reliant on the Minnesota legislature for funding, which has got a lot of farmers in it. So the last time the MPCA kind of showed their teeth, they lost their ability to regulate it. And if it's a local soil and water conservation district or a local watershed district, well, those boards are staffed with farmers. So that's what I'm saying, like the local, it doesn't seem like running for a watershed district board is a big deal. It's a huge deal, right? And because if it wasn't, the farmers wouldn't be so diligent about it. And they've been doing this since farmers came to town, Norwegian farmers. We gotta organize, farmers unions and all this. They've been political since the beginning. And, I speak at Lake Association meetings and they always say, well, we're a non-political organization set up to protect, Fairmount Lake or whatever lake it is. And I always say, no, this meeting right here, you sitting here, this is about the public good. This is a political event. It's nonpartisan, but it's political. We need to grab hold of our politics because if we don't, someone else will. And we're not gonna like the outcomes.
This is a publication that I referenced several times in the book. This is the one I talked about, when an activist group comes to town. This was Land Stewardship Project developed a brochure called When a Factory Farm Comes to Town, and to help citizens organize. The industry, with the help of the Minnesota Farm Bureau Federation, put together this publication like 25 years ago. This is when we were fighting Ripley Dairy. And one of the things they tell their people, they've been telling their folks for 25 years or more, vote for and support pro-agriculture candidates for county commissioner and township officer. Pro-agriculture is code for pro-industry or pro-corporate agriculture. They've been stacking the deck in these local communities for decades, and they won't leave, by the way. We used to have term limits in Dodge County on the planning commission, because that planning commission is stacked with all the industry guys. They used to have term limits. They got rid of term limits. You
They-
can't,
They also ran into the same issue in Becker County, where the permits were stacked. They were able to put it off a little bit because the White Earth Indian Reservation was able to say no. But then they came back and it went through. So the feeder operation is going in, and now they're gonna start doing the breeder farm,
It's the
when they-
gestational facility
Yeah,
and then
that went in.
that went in?
I think so, yeah.
God help us.
Yes, sir.
I'm just confused about the root cause of this. The root cause seems to be that we eat pork, or that we eat, or so, I mean, we need to eat, we like to eat, we eat. So, I mean, I'm a little bit confused, we need some number of pigs produced so we can eat as much pork, as big, so I'm a little bit confused.
We produce the same number of hogs today. The USDA, I include this statistic in the book, I think it was 2018, 73 million hogs in 2018, and the same number of hogs back in 1943, I think.
Yeah.
So, same number, but
Yeah.
what's happened? Consolidation, because the companies that I mentioned, we have huge consolidation.
So why does
There's
that, why
no
does-
free, there's no
why
free
does that
market.
matter? So if 73 million hogs were pooping then, and 73 million hogs are pooping now, so what's different?
So, okay,
Where's that concentration?
Concentration and
Concentration.
corporate greed, because we have put all of this in the hands of just a few multinational corporations.
Well, I understand that, but if poop is the issue, I understand that, there's all kinds of issues. with
right, but
farming.
Yeah,
when,
yeah.
when there, you have,
Specifically about water, if
Right.
it's the same amount of poop, I don't understand what's
so there
changed.
was more buffalo traveling the Great Plains than there are cows today,
Yeah.
right? They were moving, and they were churning the soil with their hooves, and they were pooping,
Mhm.
right? But it was spread across the landscape slowly.
Mhm.
It's not like you're aggregating over 1 million gallons of manure and dead carcasses and feed. I mean, the floor of these feeds are great, so everything just
Mhm.
falls through, right? They weren't gathering it all together and then spraying it on the land all at once. So, like, and if you go to our website, it kind of lays out what happens to the soil. So when you're, doing this intensive farming, the soil loses its infiltration capacity. As the organic matter in soil decreases, it can percolate less water, so you get runoff. So on a typical farm, if it rains more than an inch of rain an hour, it starts to flow off. Some of the regen ag farms that we're working with, where they're moving their cows, so they have paddocks and they move the cows in some cases every 4 hours from one area to the next. So they graze down the plants, native plants, and then they poop, and then they move them. The infiltration rate can get as high as 6 inches an hour. So the water's going down into the ground rather than running off the landscape and into the ditch and then into the river. So by consolidating it, right, so that the corporate profits from the farm are funneled up to one company, one entity,
Mhm.
instead of spread across thousands of farmers and thousands of acres, you consolidate the problems. You consolidate the poop, and you spray it all at once. And that's the problem. It's like the industrialization of a natural process causes
But
damage
Those
to the
fields need to
ecosystem.
be fertilized though. So
Well-
the alternative to poop is what? Bauxite or, I don't
Commercial
I don't-
fertilizer, but during my youth, we had lots of hog farmers. Those were hogs that were raised small. You might have 100, 200 hogs. Now, the standard size is 2,400. And so, but those hogs were raised, and then, they burrow into the land, or if they were in a building, it would be straw. And then the manure would mix in with the straw, and you'd put that on the land. But we had much smaller, but it's a matter of, we've concentrated the marketplace, we've concentrated the manure, the runoff from these facilities, because it's too much and the land cannot take it. I mean,
So there are
we
places that-
didn't
there are
have 30,000
There
hogs
are
in.
places where pigs used to wander that are no longer. So basically, the Minnesota pigs used to be elsewhere, is that sort of what's going on?
They were scattered across thousands of farms,
Thousands of farms.
instead of aggregated onto one farm.
Mhm.
And the manure from those hogs was spread across thousands of farms,
Okay.
instead of aggregated in one farm, sprayed in one area on one day.
Okay, so it's poop concentration is the issue.
Well, right, and you made the point about fertilizers, so if you look at the productivity of land
Mhm.
for raising animals, the regen farms can raise more animals per acre because the grazing and the movement, right, builds soil. And it's more productive, but it's not more profitable to an entity.
Right.
It's less profitable to the entity. It's more productive for the farm,
Yeah.
right? And in those cases, like our farmers don't use any fertilizers. I mean, when there's one family, Abe and his wife, and they were kind of in the industrial ag thing, and they got out and started doing regen ag. When they were running the farm, kind of in the way you learn in the farm school at the University of Minnesota, they both had jobs off the farm. He drove a truck all night and farmed during the day. She worked during the day and farmed at night, right? So they were like ghosts passing in the night. They made the jump to regen ag. Both of them are off the farm. They've got 5 kids that they're raising. I mean, the only job they have is on the farm now. And the point that he made to me was, I said, so what's the best thing about this type of farming? And he said, there's nothing on my farm that can hurt my children. I got no chemicals, so he doesn't have to buy fertilizers. He doesn't need them because of the way it's applied. He's not pumping water anymore because, 1 inch of rain per acre, if it infiltrates into your ground, is 10,000 gallons of water, right? Which stays there. So a couple of years ago when we had that bad drought, I drove up to his farm to pick up some food. It was brown, where people were spraying. I got to Abe's farm and there's wildflowers growing and stuff. So he's saving $90,000 a year in irrigation costs, right? So the inputs are less, but the things I'm saying, irrigation and fertilizer, those are all the products of big ag. That doesn't benefit them. So that's not their model, right? So we can raise the food that we need without this. We just can't power large multinational farm corporations unless we farm this way.
In that pyramid I showed you, all those profits are getting pushed up to the multinationals at the top. Have any of you been to the Spam Museum in Austin? Did you see the wall of all their corporate,
Subsidiaries.
all their subsidiaries? I call it their wall of shame. But that's what, with all those profits leaving these small towns, those are dollars that used to circulate in these little towns. Those dollars are all getting pushed up to the top of the pyramid to these multinational corporations. That's how we have hollowed out all these rural towns. And we have to revive rural. We have to look at ways to bring back agriculture and revive rural. And so I think it's as simple as a local meat market, because you're not going to get access to Hormel, JBS, Smithfield. You're not going to be part of that. The only way we're going to do this is we're going to have to start relying on one another and look to our neighbors.
So
Yes, sir.
you said you were being intimidated and the father was cold shoulders at church. What are and the people are encouraged to vote for corporate folks at higher levels. Who are these people and why are they, effectively not looking after their own interests within these rural communities?
But they believe that they are looking after their interests because they are convinced, as part of the corporate messaging, that this is what you do. This is how you become successful.
This is what their kids are taught at the University of Minnesota.
It's true.
You go to the ag school at the U and they're taught this model.
But when you go out, I've got a funny accent. I'm not from here, but
I love it.
But
Right.
my sister actually farmed up in Medina, so the story is as you go out there, you see people looking for less regulation, so on and so forth, and yet here we're hearing the story that even here at the U of M, CFANs, they're telling them what to support Monsanto or whoever who's a million miles from here. I just don't understand what the psychology is in these small towns. As you look around, I can tell you that Wadena and Staples are a shadow of their former selves. Right? You look in these small towns and you go, well, I can see that everything's going away. But
But then you can't compete. I mean, the problem is that it gets down to price, right? I mean, Costco's not gonna buy from a small farm.
No,
And you're not gonna, I mean,
Who are you gonna sell to?
who are you gonna sell to? I mean, at the end of it, this is the Walmartization of agriculture. I mean, it's just.
Exactly, it's exactly what it
I mean, I
is.
don't
It is
think-
exactly what it
But
is.
you look at Europe, right, and
Yeah.
it's small farms.
Right.
Because they've resisted this, and now the negotiations that we're having with Europe is they want them to take our meat.
Mhm.
And they're saying no, because it's going to destroy their communities.
Mhm.
They need to
You know?
say, hell no,
Right.
we're not taking it, because they know what's going on in this country.
Mhm.
So, question.
You mentioned in your book, about a 21-year-old that put in, 6 acres across from you, was gonna put in one of these Conac.
That's the photo I show.
Yes, and that they gave him $750,000 to put in this facility across from you. Who ultimately owns these facilities? I mean, does that guy actually, I mean, he ended up doing it, correct? They let him do it.
It was his third building, by the way.
Yeah, exactly, of the family, right?
Yeah.
The family's all interconnected.
No, his. But, well, that family has, if I took you down to Dodge County, like, that family has several of these buildings right in Westfield Township.
Right.
So, and this kid at the time was 24, so,
Does he
that was his,
ultimately own that? I mean.
he will, and so the financing is set up. The financing is set up, and so it mirrors the contract, because, like, this is, and what these young kids are told is, this is how you get started in farming, this is how you get started in corporate farming. So when you go to the University of Minnesota, I challenge all of you, go to the University of Minnesota, go to a football game, and you're gonna see Compeer Financial circling. Compeer Financial is one of the big, they fund a lot of these huge industrial operations. And look at the signage around there, because you're gonna see Hormel, Land O'Lakes, Compeer Financial, this is all big ag, all big corporate operations. But, so this kid, so his financing was probably a 10-year loan. They're told you're not gonna make much the first 10 years, because it's just enough, the payment between the contract grower and the integrator, the payment's just barely enough to cover that mortgage for that 10-year time period. Once that mortgage is done, they own the building. But I've opened discussions actually with several different contract growers and who are trying to get out. And I know a few who have actually been successful in getting out of the contract system, because we talked about the water, and these are very water intensive. They're sprayed, there's water that's sprayed onto the animals. And so there's inside these buildings, and they require a lot of upkeep and repair. And so I heard a woman speak recently, I think she was in Missouri. It was gonna cost them more to make all of the repairs and updates to the building than what they originally paid for it. So these farmers, I mean, they're stuck, a lot of these guys, they're stuck, they cannot get out. So, because it's just a constant treadmill. So, but they own the building. And $750,000, $800,000 building, so, yeah. You buy your own Walmart and you don't even get paid as much as, you'd be better off if you went to Walmart and got an actual job. They are, that's exactly what they are, indentured servants. So,
When you talk
it's,
about the water prices, they give them the water basically so they can have this agriculture in the rural towns. It takes so many gallons per hog, I understand that.
so we audited actually the factory farms in Dodge County about, I don't know, not quite 10 years ago, to see which of these operations, because at the time there were about 300 feedlots in Dodge County. About 100 of them should have had what's called a water appropriations permit.
There you go.
And because if you draw, and no, I'm not remembering the number, I wanna say 1 million gallons, do you know?
I think it's a
1 million gallons of water per year from the aquifer, you're supposed to have a water appropriations permit. So we pulled the data, and, there were six that had a water appropriations permit. And
How many?
out of about 100 that should have, so, like, that's the other thing, like, they just roll under the radar, and nobody was doing the work, so we reported it to the DNR, and the DNR went into Dodge County and a couple of other counties, and they did a sweep to check and see if the boys had their water appropriation permit.
So there's no oversight.
Limited oversight.
Limited oversight.
And
And in 2023, we worked at the legislature to kind of try and correct the permitting process on the aquifer piece, and even then, it was really, really hard. We were successful, but it's really tough. I mean, you know, the legislature is populated with lawyers, farmers, and teachers, and insurance salesmen.
And then what kind of lobbyists do Cornell and all these guys have?
An army of lobbyists.
I was
An
gonna say,
army.
there's gotta be
Yeah.
lobbyists
Yeah,
everywhere.
no, it's like
With
us,
insurance.
and we have a lobbyist that we hire, and it's like the two of us, and then it's like 20 other people in the room. All of them paid way more than us.
Right. Right.
like, what citizen has time to go to the legislature all the time, right? So, you know, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2019 or so. My husband and I went to the state legislature that year several times because they were trying to change the nuisance law in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Because what's happened is the industry has basically tied the hands of those of us who have to, live or have our farms next to these operations. And so they were trying to take away our rights to bring a nuisance action. And, because that's, because they can,
Right.
so,
Yeah.
Well, they tried, they didn't succeed.
yeah, right.
They didn't
Right.
succeed.
But those are called right to farm laws, and those have been implemented in almost every single state. I call them right to harm laws, because what it does is it ties the hands of the neighbor next door, and it puts the corporations in a power position.
Right.
And so, to hell with you, you can't bring a lawsuit. So, you just have to live with it. And this is going on, this is nationwide. So, they control land use, they control you can't bring a nuisance action. Trust me, we gotta get people up to speed, because we gotta get, the public educated on what's going on.
What other farming are they getting into with this?
I'm so sorry, we're very much over time. So I just want to, just for folks who have to go, I want to honor that. And if we can do maybe one last question and then move to signing, that would be great.
I was just wondering if it's spreading. Are they spreading to other types of animals? It's chickens, are they doing it with turkeys, are they doing it with?
This started actually with chickens. I can't think of the name of. Yeah, Tyson is one of the first ones that started it, but can't think of the author's name. He did a blurb. He might be on the back of my book. You should read his book. It's not right here, but anyway, take a look at my author website. But it started in chickens. He kind of broke it down, and so started there. Then it moved to hogs, and so this is called vertical integration. And but the turkey facilities, like we have several big turkey facilities in Dodge County. A lot of those are Jenny O facilities. I think Jenny O owns those directly. So we've gone to corporate agriculture, and they have tremendous power. They have tremendous market power, and they have tremendous political power. And we are now seeing the results of all of this on a national basis. So, any other questions? One more.
What part do restaurants play, chain restaurants and local restaurants in Minnesota, do they?
Well, they're part of the, it's part of the distribution. I mean, the problem is we've had tremendous consolidation, and with all this consolidation, and so they buy like from suppliers. You'll have to read Austin Frerich's book, cause he talks about the consolidation in the marketplace.
Ironically, there's a great book about it right above your head, John Morris the one.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Oh,
On
yeah.
the Verzilla.
Yeah.
But also, like, for our farmers, the Regen Ag farmers, one of their sources is they sell to local restaurants. So in the communities, and the local restaurants will promote, you know, that they're serving Abe's meat. So like you can find the sources, you just gotta look a little. And it's not more expensive.
It's better quality food, you don't
It's
have
better quality
antibiotics in it and so forth.
Yeah.
Wiseacre, they have their own farm.
Yeah.
So Wiseacre is a great place. Farmers Union, not Farm Bureau, has their own restaurant that's local farm to table, that's over by the Guthrie. That's another place to go.
You can look on the Sustainable Farming Association website, and so some of these farmers are pulling together, because, I mean, they're making more money by bucking the system and going local. So one of the things we can do is build the market for local food. And it's even a big movement out in rural Minnesota. People are kind of getting aware of like, well, okay, I'm gonna buy local and support that rather than, you know, go to the grocery store and, you know, buy that food.
So, my dad used to say, it's not fit to eat. Thank you, please don't be proud.